Good evening and welcome to a very important panel. I'm delighted to be hosting our evening in conjunction with the Board of Deputies of British Jews and the Association of Ethiopian Jews. I'd particularly like to thank Philip Rosenberg and Nancy Silkoff at the Board of Deputies for introducing me to Stephen and Loretta. I'm also most grateful to Rabbi Sharon Shalom from Israel for making the connections that have enabled us to include Mazal and Sagi. Everyone, apart from the panelists, is now muted. Please do feel free to make comments or observations in the chat. And after some discussion and time permitting, I shall open up to questions and ask that you use the raise hand tab on the participants menu if you would like to be noticed. One of the striking beauties of the Jewish world is its diversity. As B'nai Yisrael, we were the many children of an ancestor, each its own tribe, with its heritage, significance, and importance. We've become very used to the differences between the Jews of Ashkenaz and Sfarad, between the Hasidim and Mitnagdim. Travelers and trade routes have made us very familiar with the Jews of Yemen, of Baghdad, of Calcutta, and Kaifeng. Black Jews are also a significant historic part of our people. Moreover, while we might be reasonably familiar through Operations Moses and Solomon and the Red Sea Diving Resort on Netflix with some of the background to the Jewish community in Ethiopia, we are quite possibly far less aware of the Jews of Jamaica, a community which was known to Oliver Cromwell. This evening, we meet both. I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen Bush, who's the political editor of the New Statesman. He was also recently appointed to head up the Board of Deputies Commission into racial inclusivity in the Jewish community. In Jewish News, he asked whether he was black enough to do this job or Jewish enough. Black enough for whom? Jewish enough for whom? This evening, we will be looking at identity and perception. We welcome Mazal Bisawer and Sagi Laicha from Israel. Mazal is the former spokesperson and currently acting director of the Association of Ethiopian Jews. And Sagi is a lawyer and yeshiva graduate based in Kiryat Gat. Loretta Hodari joins us from Manchester, where she is a director of business development and will share some of the experiences that have recently made her stand up and speak out. The recent horrendous murder of George Floyd became a catalyst for outcry and demonstration around the world. It has made us suddenly aware of institutional racism, the need to address historic wrongs, as well as disadvantage and prejudice. Of course, we decry all racism, and certainly almost all of us would balk at the thought that he or she would be prejudiced or differentiate on the basis of color. However, it would be unconscionable to close our eyes to complaints raised within our own community. I know that I've sometimes expressed views which were well enough considered within my own terms of reference, only to discover that I hadn't considered the picture fully, and my words betrayed disregard or disdain for the feelings of people I care about. This evening is a chance to listen, to reflect, and to learn. In preparing our panel, I had a fascinating conversation in which I was told, I'm tired of having to tell people where I come from. And I'm as guilty as anyone of asking people who I meet, who are driving an Uber or taking my blood, where they come from. It's a normal enough gambit to open a conversation. It shows interest, and I like a story, and I'm happy to share my own. But on a certain level, it says, you are different. In fact, the first message I convey when I ask, where are you from, is, you are different. And it leaves the person that I'm talking to having to justify him or herself. The question is interpreted, why are you here? Do you really belong? Our four panelists certainly belong, and this is our chance to hear from them. But at the risk of asking that intrusive question one more time, I should like to invite each of them to introduce themselves briefly, where they come from, and what it means to each of you to be Jewish and of color or black. And so let me start off with Stephen. If you could answer the question, where do you come from and what does it mean to you?
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm actually speaking to you not very far from where I come from in Bow in East London. I've moved a whole borough to the north. I'm in Hackney in Stoke Newington. If any of you are local, I'm directly opposite the Good Egg, which has pivoted from being a very nice restaurant to a very nice place offering takeaway bagels, which is one of the reasons why I've got wider and wider in lockdown. As you said in your very kind introduction, when I was asked to do this, I kind of thought, well, am I black enough to do this and am I Jewish enough to do this? Because in a way they're both identities that I'd say I came to quite late. In my part of East London, if you were of mixed heritage, as I am, you weren't black. Not in an intrusive or unpleasant way, just because the school was sufficiently diverse, there were enough people of mixed ethnicities that the idea that we counted as black seemed eccentric to everyone, to us, to the other black children, and it was only when we went out into the world in our late teens to sixth form to university and we moved out of a very diverse school in London, then I suddenly started to realize, oh, actually, yeah, I know this can sound, this is one of those things I keep saying it and I keep realizing how silly it is to say. But I kind of went, oh, of course, I am black. That is an identity that I have, and covering political journalism and the affairs of Westminster as I do in my day job, where I am often one of very few non-white faces, that identity becomes more obvious to me. And in many ways, it's the same story with Jewishness in that, yeah, I come from a kind of sort of firmly atheistic kind of Jewish tradition in which almost the only one, although my grandfather towards the end of his life, the synagogue in Lusaka stopped being something that was important as a social hub to him and became something that was of spiritual nourishment to him. But we very much were, a family for whom our Jewishness meant going for Simchat Torah, coming together for Passover. I, as the youngest child for a long time, would always, why is this not like other nights? But as strange as it seems, having said that, I would, until the start of this decade, if someone had said, oh, you're Jewish, like, oh, no, not at all. I don't quite know why. It was one of these things. I was preparing my notes with a friend, kind of saying, and they kind of went, they said, Stephen, you were really excited to be invited to speak at events when you were announced this commission because the cast of The Prince of Egypt were there. They were, well, do you think I'd be excited by that? But I think, for me at least, because it was always a kind of private, cultural, familial identity, one which was about memories I shared with my aunt or my great aunt or my mother or my grandfather. It wasn't a social identity until, regrettably, in the last decade, last almost decade of covering politics, it became an issue. It became something which started to shape how I thought about politics. I found for the first time in my life in 2012 that I could not vote for the Labour candidate because I personally felt sufficiently uncomfortable with Ken Livingstone's remarks that I realised I felt I could not vote in that mayoral election. And then, of course, in the 2017 general election, those same issues, which had been a source of great pain to me in London, became a source of pain to me at a national level. And I began to realize at that point that it wasn't just a familial connection or kind of a part of my family's history. It was something that was important to me in the present day. And it became something that I affirmatively saw as part of my identity. So those are kind of my two sort of identities, and that's the perspective I bring, and the perspective that I'm trying to sort of semi-consciously forget as I take testimony on racial inclusivity and with an open mind. But thank you very much for having me this evening.
Thanks, Stephen. And I'm going to go over to Mazal now, but just as we do that, I'd like to thank you and Sagi so much for joining us. It's only 8:30 in the evening. For you, it is 10:30 at night, and you've had a long day. You work on Sunday, and we really, really appreciate both of you coming in this evening. Mazal.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me, first of all. I would like to answer that question, but I would like to direct my answer to the combination of being both Jewish and Black. First of all, I'll say a few words about myself. My name is Mazal. I was born and raised here in Israel. My parents came to Israel during the early 80s from Ethiopia. They made Aliyah. I'm 32 years old and I'm happily married and live in Tel Aviv, but I'm originally from Kiryat Gat, so hi, Sagi. I've been a political and social activist for many years, and now I work at the AEJ, the Association of Ethiopian Jews, trying to work towards changing policy towards a more equal policy from the state of Israel. So that's me. But I would say that for me, being both Black and Jewish, to me, it's a conflict. It's to live in an ongoing conflict. Here in Israel, we have a very unique situation where being Jewish is also being Israeli. And when the religion is intertwined with nationality, it creates a little bit more of a complex situation. So I feel like my identity is very complex. Sometimes I'm more, the environment demands for me to be more Jewish, sometimes more Black. I have all kind of components to my identity, and each time a different one is getting more of the spotlight. It's an internal conflict, but it's also a conflict for, I would say, the rest of the Jewish population here in Israel to fully accept that there can be people that are both Jewish and Black, and being Black doesn't necessarily means that maybe you're less Jewish. It's one of the things that we still work on and struggle here in Israel. That's it for now.
Thanks so much. And Loretta in Manchester. Hang on, you're on mute.
Yes, it's okay. I'm off now. Good evening, everyone. As Rabbi Lawrence has said, I'm Loretta. I was born in Manchester, and I love it here. It's an amazing place. But I did spend a few years in Jamaica. And during those years, I discovered, it was my very formative years, and discovered that I was Jewish. And it didn't really have any great meaning. I was still very, very, very young. But I always knew I would raise my family in the Jewish way. And I had a cousin who kind of kept reminding me, just remember, we're different, we're Jewish. And I never really met any other Jews. I used to ask my mom, where are they? And she used to say, they're all died out, you know? And I really thought there were no others. And when I did actually meet a Jamaican Jew in Manchester, and then I met loads of other Jews in Manchester who were sent during the war to Jamaica, it was just really exciting, and we were connected on a very nice level. I went to school in England where I was the only Black one in a class. I was you know, somehow the school didn't have many Black children, and then they were split into schools, and then they were split into class, and I just ended up in a class without. And then I ended up in areas where I was always the only Black one, and then I ended up studying science, and I was the only Black one. And I went to university doing a degree in chemistry, and I was the only Black one. And you know, I just got very comfortable with being the only Black person everywhere I go. I'm a very strong character. I think I was from the day I was born. So once I became comfortable with my identity, which I think was as a child, just like maybe 6, 7 years old, I just kind of ran with it. I just, once I embraced the religious side, of like being Jewish. It's just my whole life. Being an Orthodox Jew is just in Manchester. It's got different shades of whatever. And I lived in South Manchester. Amazing, amazing community there. There isn't any like it. I'm now living in the north since I got married. And it's a little bit different, but it's still, I have an amazing community here. And can't separate my identities apart from the fact that being the only Jewish one, being the only Black Jew around has never fazed me. So, you know, I can't speak for everyone else because everybody else has got different personalities. And I know a lot of Black Jews do find it a bit challenging sometimes to be that only one. And I've never had it. But as an introduction, that's it.
Thanks, Loretta. And now down to Kiryat Gat and Sagi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sagi. As Mazal said, I was born in Ethiopia. And I came to Israel at the 80s throughout Sudan. Went to high school, which called in Or in the north, and Yeshiva University in Gush Etzion. And later on, I went to Bar Ilan and studied political science and criminology. Later on, I got a scholarship to Brandeis. I earned my master from Brandeis. And after that, I went to the Interdiscipline Center at Herzliya Law School. Today, I work for the welfare Israeli government. To your question, Rabbi Lawrence, being a Black Jew is very challengeable. When we were in Ethiopia, even though we have a dark color at the local society, we were very discriminated because of our religion. And then when we came to Israel, again, we have to face another challenge, which is our color. And then sadly, in Ethiopia, you live with people like you, same color, same culture, and same language. Still, they don't accept you, because your religion. They call you by a derogatory name as Filasha. And when we came home to Israel, suddenly you have different challenges. Now it's not your religion, but your color, and you have to face with another new challenge, and that's different area. Sadly, you feel very disappointed because you thought, I done with the diaspora, with the exile, and I come, and now I'm going back home. However, when you came here and you have to face with your identity, with your religion, basically question your religion, your identity, and then you get to really a new challenge, which is raises a new questions and about yourself. And that's very, for me, to be Black is very challengeable, but at the same time, it shave you, it shave you as human being, shave you when you face hard, difficult challenges, just give you a new perspective to see the life. So, for this time, I've been already here for 30 years in Israel, and I think things getting change, but still we have challenges that we have to deal with.
It's an absolutely fascinating idea that you come home and discover you've traded one form of discrimination for another form of discrimination, and something that was so much an inherent and natural part of you while you were growing up suddenly becomes, and was a completely nondescript feature, suddenly becomes a part of your defining identity. I mean, that must have been a very rude shock to you and to indeed the entire community that came over. And one of the questions that, or one of the words that has been, phrases that's been used a lot at the moment has been institutional racism. And I think perhaps it would be helpful if you could begin by saying, what is institutional racism and how have you come across it? How has it affected you and your family?
Rabbi Lawrence, I want to give you two examples for institution racism in my view. For instance, when we came to Israel, by the government, by the Minister of Health, was decided that the blood of the community won't be used, and they just throw it under the table. That is, for example, a good example for institutional racism. Another example is the religion institution. You know, when we came to Israel, our parents were davening for years to come to this country, believe that we are Jews, and we sacrifice ourselves among the Christian, the Islam in Sudan, in Ethiopia. And eventually when we came home, it turned out that the rabbinical institution decided that we're not enough Jew. They question our identity. That for me is a good example how the institution decided about your identity, about your about your religion. So my community is really faced during this time in Israel in different way of institutional racism.
Wow. Stephen. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, of course. So institutional racism, I think, to me at least, I would put it on, I would describe it as the things you experience that don't have a face, and it's quite difficult almost to work out who you would complain to, because it's kind of so sort of formless. I guess one of the strange things, and one of the things I found very interesting about hearing others speak, is that in many ways, my ability to escape some forms of institutional racism is because, as with many people I imagine on this call, including some friends of mine who I know on this, and from your very helpful preparatory notes, I know that this is true of you as well, Rabbi, that my great-grandfather decided we should abandon the name of Szymanski in the 1930s, and we would take on the name of Bush because we owned a store in Shepherd's Bush called Bush Stores. And he thought that this would make the family's life easier. And I think then the prejudices that he correctly believed we would be able to escape by doing that, people passing over CVs, people making assumptions about us, that is, to me at least, what institutional racism is. And I've sometimes, not for a long time, but when I was applying for jobs after university, I would turn up and I could tell they were surprised because the name Stephen Bush does achieve what my great-grandfather wanted to achieve for us, which is a white English name. And I could feel that they were surprised, and we know that if you have a name that is not white English, you have to send off slightly more CVs. And that to me is kind of the thing I would use to describe institutional racism in the United Kingdom.
Right. Mazal.
I would like to suggest that institutional racism is much more than the way that we're being treated in terms of human relations. It's much wider and deeper than that. To me, institutional racism is when the people, the decision makers, the people that have the power have their own prejudice and racial bias, and that affects their approach to me as a citizen in a country. And this approach basically determines what policies do they have, do they apply on me as a citizen, what kind of laws or regulations would they affect on me, and that basically affects my everyday life as a minority. If we're looking at Israel, then one of the examples that we have is, my organization works a lot with, the relations between police and citizens, especially of Ethiopian descent, Israeli of Ethiopian descent. And one of the things that we're seeing is that while we're trying to talk to police about racism and and the effects that it creates, and profiling and shooting bias, you know, stuff that has to do with global phenomena that exist in any other countries, over-policing. We see how the police reacts to our claims through their own prejudice. Most of the times they would, while we're talking about profiling, they would try to talk about cultural sensitivity. To us, talking about cultural sensitivity, first, it's blaming the victim, meaning maybe something with my culture creates the fact that you are over-policing me or using aggression towards me. And also, talking about culture as an issue, basically saying we all have a specific culture. You have your own culture, and I mean, there's a gap. There's something that we need to work on, and to us, it's a racial approach to talk about, you know, about racism and about profiling, and you can see it in every. Even, you know, when we're looking at education, the approach is that if we want to advance the young students in Israel that come from Ethiopian origin families, then we need to segregate them and to create specific programs for them, since they have some kind of unique needs, or we need to attend to them in a special way. And this is a policy that the education department has, a policy that the police department have, that is being created out of racial bias. And this is how the institution basically creates discrimination, because the way the institution perceives me as a minority. And to me, it's very different than, you know, the person that will use the N-word, or the person that wouldn't like to sit next to me on the bus. Those, you know, this stuff has to do with more, in my opinion, that's racism, but it's less afflicting. It's less. It has less power on me. It has less of an influence over my everyday life, over my rights, over my life as a citizen here in Israel, my rights. And to me, that is the big difference. And if you don't mind, I would like to add another thing. Continuing the issues that Sagi brought up, the issue of, you know, we have a unique situation here, as I said, for Black people in Israel. Since, as Sagi said, one of the ways that we experience the institutional racism is from the rabbinical institution and through the channel of doubting our Judaism. And what I would like to say about it is that we need to separate, you know, sometimes Jewish people, I would say, from my experience, tend to think that maybe since we're Jewish, then we don't have the issues of racism. Maybe since we're Jewish, I don't know if we suffer from anti-Semitism, or maybe because if it doesn't matter if I'm Black, because I'm Jewish, then inherently you can't use racism towards me. But it's not true. I think that we need to separate the two. Racism is a sociological phenomena, and the case of Israel just shows that the racism is sociological process or phenomena, and the religion, being Jewish, is the way that people here will practice their racism towards us by discriminating us, using Jewishness as a way to discriminate us, to say you're not belong. When in fact what they are reacting to is the color of my skin. Hopefully I was clear enough.
That was very clear. I'm still reeling by the sort of dehumanizing message that Sagi mentioned of blood being discarded. That's just such an emotive and terrible image. Loretta, are you able to talk a bit about
Not really.
institution?
not really able to top all this.
No.
Mazal,
But
you
also
covered it all.
adds to it. So,
I am going to. I am going
took us
to.
into, which is the
I am
religious
going
world, because
to.
I think that's an important area.
Oh yes, it definitely is. And again, it's a lot like what Mazal has said. Obviously, it's about the structures, the systems, the procedures that institutions have. Whether it's
You tie it down, concrete examples.
yes, whether it's synagogues, whether it's schools. I was speaking to someone the other day, and she said to me, I went to the shadchan, and the shadchan said, she had a son, and her son was interested in one of the girls, but the shadchan goes, one of the parents is Sephardi, do you really want that? And this one it's a prejudice that has the power to bring about a change. That's a massive change in society that's influencing people about the type of people that's suitable. And again, it's not about Judaism, it's about something about the color of the skin. And of course, it carries on to if you're black. I'm starting with the Sephardi here. We have the Yemenites, the Ethiopians, you've got the black people that are coming through now that you're seeing a lot more of. And this is what my friend is telling me. You've got this. We've got friends who are playing games in this country. Sephardi are playing games with their names. We heard other people say they're changing their names. I can tell you, I had a serious a rabbi who came here, and he had a very, very, very frum family, very Haredi family. And the girl said to me, "Oh, we had such a confusing start." They went to school in Israel, and the mother said to her the first day, "You know what? You've got to." Her name was a bit Sephardi. You've got to change your name. And she gave her a new name. But when she was in the classroom, she couldn't remember the name. So she looked next door, and the girl next door was called Sarah. So she said, I'm Sarah so-and-so, and put a Didinsky at the end of her, Jakobsky or something like this, to make it fit into the Ashkenazi way. And what we're saying here is that there's a kind of racism that's going on. I'm using the Sephardim here because there's a reaction to the color, and the color moves. The Yemenites, the Ethiopians, the obviously black people. It's almost like there's this little system going on, but it's all the same for people who are Jews of color. Is that having to fight this system? Like you say, you can't see it because when the black people go to the shadchan, they're not going to get this message. They're going to get something else. And we know that there's a need for training people here. We've got, that's the schools, just trying to get into the schools. I think I mentioned that before. The synagogues, I don't know. There's a lot of black people struggling to get through synagogue doors in England, and this really shouldn't be happening. And there's something where there's not, you can't be Jewish if you're black, and it's there. But generally speaking, in Britain, just like the police laws, and I didn't expect to see it in Israel. I was really shocked, as Mazal spoke, to say that. The policing. But in England, we had it for many years. And they've had it in America, where they use the vagrancy law in England, the SUS laws they were called. And you only had to suspect that someone was loitering with an intent to commit a crime. And, if they saw groups of young black boys together, they were picked on, and this is institutional racism. It's not saying, the law doesn't say go and stop black people. It just affects them disproportionately because people are able to use their biases and their prejudice. And as in the George Floyd situation, he had killed before. It wasn't the first time he'd been involved in killing a black person, but the institutional racism involved in bringing a case, the amount of evidence, the likelihood that he could have been resisting arrest, it made it very, very difficult for anyone to actually bring successful cases. I mean, had it not been for something so open where you had you had the video, we would still have been in this situation where black people are having to prove, that he wasn't killed because he was black. And without the evidence, it's very hard because the institution is on the side of the person carrying out the racism. Sorry, I'll stop there.
That's great. So a question to Stephen. You've been appointed as the convener of the Commission on Inclusivity within the Jewish community, and that's an affirmative way of phrasing it, rather than looking at a racism within the community. But I was wondering, what are the terms of reference that you're going to be looking at in your commission? What are you looking to identify, and which organizations do you see that there are going to be questions asked?
Right, so the terms of reference are, so we had our kind of first evidence gathering session in which many people very helpfully contributed to what they saw as the problems and scope. And we've produced the kind of draft terms of reference for further consultation. But my hope is that it will be purposefully very broad in terms of its scope. So it will not just be the concerns of Black British Jews, but racial inclusivity within the community as a whole. And I'm going to probably fail to forget some of the strands and issues that have been brought up. But its kind of frame is every year kind of cultural spaces, religious spaces, commercial spaces. Sorry, that was what meant by the first C. And I think that one of the interesting and kind of recurrent messages I've received in my inbox since I took this on is a very familiar story. Yeah, it's become a very familiar story to me, which is someone who happily grows up a Black British Jew or a British Jew from the Indian subcontinent, who is very comfortable in their own community here in the United Kingdom. Perhaps they're at a Reform synagogue, perhaps they're an Orthodox synagogue, perhaps they're at a liberal synagogue. And then they move to another part of the country and they no longer feel as welcome in their preferred denomination, and they find that they have to choose between somewhere they feel comfortable because of the color of their skin and somewhere they feel comfortable in terms of their sort of theological position. And I think that will be one of the focuses. We'll be trying to work out, well, why is it in Scotland, a British Jew whose parents are from Mumbai felt welcome in a liberal synagogue, and then when they moved to London, they felt unwelcome. And why did someone who made a similar journey in reverse feel? So part of it will be that kind of thing. Some of it, I think, will be about kind of sort of general awareness of the community in all its diversity and richness. Several people have said, and I don't know if anyone else remembers it, but there was a very powerful bit of photographic art, I think in 2018, about modern British Jews. And lots of people found this very exciting because it was the first time they had seen themselves, other than, kind of seen themselves in art celebrating the community. So I think it's going to sort of be all of that but the aim of the terms of reference is to produce things that are tangible that we can do ourselves. I don't know if anyone saw I thought, very thoughtful and well-drafted letter that some JFS alumni were organising and circulating. And one thing I thought was very clever about it was that they were very aware that some of the changes to the curriculum they were asking for were things that they would have to ask the government lobby for. I think that's a very admirable campaign, but one of the things I'm very clear on is, and what I want my commission to do, is focus on things we can do ourselves unilaterally, that we then don't require us in very many options to ask others for support. So that's what the focus will be, although it is slightly up in the air because I am consulting on what the terms of reference should be at the moment.
Right. A question to Sagi here, first off, and we can go take it wider, but what do you think that religious organizations such as shuls or yeshivot need to consider? Are there problems that arise from the characterization of black people or color in the Torah and the rabbinic sources?
Well, it's a very good question, Rabbi Lawrence. Let's start with the Bible. When God created the world, the first chapter of Genesis, God created Adam and Eve, and he didn't mention, he didn't talk about color. He just created two people, and as we know, in every governmental office, there is a sentence that say God created the man with the man was created by the shadow of God. Every government just use this sentence. However, God didn't mention any color. He didn't say if Adam and Eve they were white or color of people. And the other place we see the Bible mention talk about color is with the prophet Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses. And there we can learn how God looked on those people, on racist people, or people who is discriminate another people, because when we see the punishment of Miriam, it came because he talked about the marriage of Moses. Okay, Rabbi Moses, he was married with a black woman, and she was pissed off how he dared to marry with a black woman, right? But when we look on the punishment, God didn't punish Miriam on that matter. God punished Miriam because he talked about Moses, because she felt that he and Aaron, they are the same level. But God didn't punish him on that color. Why? Because talking about color is just waste of time, just rubbish. How would say in British, just rubbish. God created every man equal. For by the eyes of God, black, white, or anybody, just his children. So the Bible, if you go over the Bible, there's no such thing about black or white. Just there is creator of God. Human being was created by God. Moreover, Rabbi Loretta, I want to mention in the book of Exodus, all right? The Bible talk about slavery, slave, okay? The Torah say, if someone own money or brought money or take mortgage and he couldn't pay the own, you sell him for 6 years, okay? But the Torah didn't say, it didn't talk about color, it didn't talk about the black man. But what happened in history? Man took this sentence and he used to his interest. The man defined. He decided that black men should be slaves, but God didn't say that. God talked about slavery in situation when someone on money or he has mortgage and he couldn't pay, you have to sell him for 6 months, for 6 years. But people use to their interest the Bible, okay? And sorry, remind me what was the beginning of the question?
So the question was, what do you think needed to be done within religious institutions and within the way that we teach religion in schools?
All right. When we came at the beginning to Israel, even today, I think still exists in the extra, ultra Orthodox. When you go to shul and they saw a man from the community, they didn't consider him to a minyan. They didn't account him, you know, as part of the minyan. They should leave the minyan or wait until someone came to be, you know, to have 10 people, Israeli people, okay? So we have still a lot of work to do in this country. Still, you know, in different schools, you see they won't accept Ethiopian kids to their institution. Or, you know, as Mazal and mentioned earlier with the police department, we have police brutality here in this country. They couldn't even imagine, you know, as a Jewish, how we could have such an institution that discriminate, judge people about their color, you know, based on their color. You cannot consider it. You know, I want to say one more thing, Rabbi Lawrence. As a Jewish, we have huge contradiction. In one hand, we're downing every day to God to bring us back home. Okay? God gather us from all over the world to Israel. On the other hand, when God brought the brown child, you pull the child with the water, and you say, "No, no, God, excuse me, I didn't dive for this child." That you have huge contradiction. If you don't know what you pray for, you know, you can't ask on one hand God to bring all Jews to the country, and when God brought all the community throughout the desert, throughout Islamic country, throughout Sudan, and brought the community home, and you say, "No, thank you, God, I didn't mean by davening to this child." No, Jewish, if you're really Jewish, if you believe in what reading in the Torah, God brought this community to this country, and our community fulfill the vision of Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Zechariah, all the great prophet of the Judaism. So we have still a lot of work to do in institution, particularly in the orchestra, on the Orthodox communities with all these, you know, how they see the community, and we still have a lot of work to do with the police department. For me, it's really hard to conceive how Jewish police can shoot a Jewish kid because his color. It's inconceivable. It's really hard to imagine. So we have a lot of work to do with education. We need to do with also to work with to help with the law in order to correct all this distorted perception. It's impossible. It cannot be a Jew religion and to be racist. It is impossible. You can't dive to God to brought you home, and the other hand to say, "No, God, I didn't mean to this. I meant to a blonde child, not the brown child." That's we have a lot of work to do in this country.
So I'd like to pick up on the what we can do very shortly, but specifically ask Mazal, coming in from what Sagi has said, and the pressure that the community necessarily feels, and the sense of rejection. How does one raise a family to have pride in one's heritage and the genuinely authentic tradition of the Ethiopian community that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years? And indeed, when it first encountered the Jews of Jerusalem, who said, you know, we'll teach you how to be like us and do it properly, they sent back a letter saying, you want to learn how to do it properly, send some emissaries, live with us, and we'll show you how we've been doing it for a lot longer than there have been Ashkenazim, Hasidim, and Lubavitchers. So, you know, how do you create that sense of pride? And then Loretta, also the same question: how do you celebrate the the Jamaican Jewish heritage? You need to unmute. Mazal, that's it.
Okay. So I'm going to answer this question from a very personal point of view. I would say that that the best thing that happened to me was understanding that Judaism, being Jewish, has nothing to do with what I am experiencing as a Black person, as a Black woman here in Israel. That understanding, I think, saved me from alienating, you know, my heritage and the place that I came from, my parents' traditions, and also from the Jewish, in Hebrew we say Zerem Yehudi, from the Jewish perspective of my parents and their heritage. You know, I would like also to address, you asked Sagi what should, you know, yeshivas and shuls should do. I think that it's even a bigger question than that. I think that in order to understand, in order to answer that question, we need to look at the whole Jewish world. Being Jewish, the important thing that I understood that being Jewish is something that is part of me, and that is it's not something that someone else can doubt. It's a religion. It's an identity. The fact that people are using Judaism to discriminate me means something about them, not about me. But here in Israel, one of the ways that that Ethiopian Jews are suffering from racism is through Judaism, is questions, are you Jewish enough? How did you practice Judaism in Ethiopia? Are you kosher enough to get married? I mean, those are the ways that people here are practicing racism towards us. And I think that it should take the Jewish world into a wider discussion over who is in charge and who has the monopoly over deciding who is Jewish and who is the right Jew. Why in 2020 we are still obsessing over the question, how does the Jewish person look like? Is he white? Is he Black? What kind of, you know, rabbis does he follow? What kind of toshba or ceremonies or how does he do his prayers? I mean, this is what is defining us as Jews. We need to accept the fact that there are all kinds of zramim of being Jewish. There's not, here in Israel, what is acceptable is that there is the Orthodox Jews, and you know, the rest is like, what is the word? Everything is kind of a version of that, but that is not true. And as long as we believe in that, and as long as we allow that ideology or perspective about Judaism, you know, guide us, then we will allow racism, you know, live and prosper within the Jewish world. And I want to say that it is possible to be Jewish and racist. It is, because being racist is something that has to do with society. It's something that has to do with prejudice, with an open mind, or a way or ability to accept the difference between me and another person. And being Jewish is believing in a certain way of life and being, you know, part of a community, and being and basically a daughter or a son to that religion. And it's our choice to, you know, connect those two, or sometimes, you know, use our religion to act as a racist person, or we can use that to guide us towards, you know, separating the two and not accepting that. But I strongly disagree with that approach that since we're Jewish, then we don't have that gene of racism. Many people get all defensive. I cannot be a racist since I'm Jewish. That is not true. And in order for us to correct that, and this is my suggestion to any Jewish community that has Jews of color, we need to realize that, we need to accept that, we need to be in dialogue with that and not get all defensive and avoid that that issue. We need to be, one of the questions that you sent us is how can we act, or is it enough to not be racist? No, it's not enough to not be racist. Not be racist means that you are very passive about racism. Being anti-racist is, taking a stand against racism. And when you're anti-racist, then you can, you're in touch with it. You have an interaction with it. You're thinking about it. You have a discussion about it. You're looking for ways to influence. You're deciding maybe even just to, set boundaries and not accept racism within your surrounding. So hopefully I was able to convey a little bit of my experience as someone that is being sometimes very conflicted when people are, doubting my Judaism or my parents' Judaism. Basically, they are doubting something that it's a core component of my identity. And many times when I grew up, it shook me. It created a very non-stable identity, a sense that, just like that, my belongingness to a certain place in society or this country can be eliminated, can be doubted, can be all kinds of things. But the best thing that happened to me is understanding that it has to do with me being Black, and to own the fact that I am a dark-skinned person. It creates some kind of treatment towards me from my surrounding and both society-wise and institutional-wise. And to me, that is the way to create, to be able to raise a person that is that can deal with racism without being so fragile about his own identity and history. And I can talk on and on about,
we're not going to let you. We're not going to let you. We want to hear from
the
Loretta.
rabbinical world, but I'll let Loretta also to join me.
I know, but it's just such a shame that we're having the same experience in Israel and in England. And when you're at home, it's like, if a child keeps coming home and you keep saying to the child on the doorstep, what you're doing here, the child's going to start thinking, what's going on. But to address the question, let me have a look at it again, to do with religious organizations and the yeshivas and the problems. Sorry?
And pride in your identity.
Yes. Well, is there a space? First of all, I'm not a rabbi, Sagi, but I so agreed with your starting point. The Torah, we don't need to wonder where to look. The Torah has been such an immense gift to the Jewish people. And it has taught us everything we need to know about how we should behave. And, apart from the fact that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu married a Black woman, we know then this is the greatest leader we've ever had. These are the examples, no element of racism at all. We know that when we were building the temple, everyone was asked for half a shekel, half a shekel. Your half is not better than my half. And, half just means half. And, I don't know what that means. For a lot of people, that does translate, like it's about time we have a system that when our Jewish Jews of color are wandering from synagogue to synagogue, there must be some way of instituting a code so that they're not made to feel, that there's a different law. We also know that there is a mention, is there a mention of race in the Torah? There isn't, but I found something in Perke de Rabbi Eliezer at the beginning of chapter 24, where it does refer to Shem, the son of Noah, as being described as being Black. Now, this particular episode in the Jewish history, where Noah had some wine and Noah got drunk and you know, Ham came in and he saw him, has led to a lot of bad things going on within the Jewish community in terms of what is being taught in our schools and what's being taught in our yeshivas. You know, the fact that there is the curse of Ham, and somehow, although it says in the Torah that the Canaanites shall be cursed, it gets twisted and turned somewhere. And obviously this is, you know, this is using the Torah to one's own means. To say that the black people have, you know, have some bad traits. And this is being played out in some very religious circumstances where people are using this to teach the children that black people, just aren't the same. And what it means is that the black Jew also finds themselves up against this. But the Torah teaches us that we should love the stranger like ourselves. And this again is in Vayikra, Leviticus 19 verse 34. And all the time it's telling us 36 times that as Jews, we should engage in empathy. Even if you had the thought that someone had converted, that you should engage in empathy, and you should never remind them ever again of it. So a Jew who's converted and who is black gets this more than a Jew who's converted and is white. So it's something that the community is doing with, you know, with the racism. All I can say in terms of the response to this is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And we don't expect racism in Judaism. We expect the refinement that the Torah was meant to bring. And I'm a great believer that if you learn it and you teach it, it's time to live it. And we should all be living a very, very high life. And when I say we, this is the pain that when racism exists in Judaism, it's as though I'm condoning it as well, because actually, as part of the Jewish people, I cannot separate myself out to say I'm not Jewish. So this is part of my double hat. You know, I've got lots of black friends who are not Jewish, and I've got to answer for the racism of Jewish people. And if they read headlines that say, oh, Jews are suffering in Israel, they come up and they say, well, look, even Jews are racist. You know, what you're doing as part of these people, why don't you how can a black person worship with someone who's racist? I know that a lot of, and it's mentioned, Sagi mentioned it, you know, black men not getting aliyot. These are things that are not part of the refinement that Torah brings. You know, because we are supposed to use it to refine ourselves. We've got rabbis, and it's got to come from the top. You know, the leaders have got to show the way, and we've got to root it out. With, you know, someone was explaining that a black woman, she went into the school, and someone was explaining that, oh, you know, when Avram Avinu and Sarah Imenu, when they went traveling, they met a lot of people who were very dark, you know, and she was so fair. She was beautiful compared to everybody compared to her, everybody else were like monkeys. You know, a 5-year-old child is getting one message only. And if you're saying to me what the Torah says, the Torah is calling us to a higher level. And if our leaders are not taking the way, and the rabbis have got a lot to answer for. And I'm sorry, Rabbi Lawrence, we have to look here at you now, and we have to say, in this shul, you have to root it out in this shul. Any little behavior that's stopping people at the gate, that's making a child feel out of place. You know, you as a rabbi, you have to introduce this person to the community in a way that is elevating, that will encourage the community to connect with anybody that comes into the community that is white. Sorry. Oh, that's a lot of, you know, this is it. And if you need a training program, we, Mazal, where's Stephen gone? Sagi, we're all able to provide guidance and training to the shul. So you can put on amongst your shiurim this extra refinement that we want from the Jewish people. And, you know, I have nothing more to say because I think Mazal covered so much of it in such a broad way. And I think we've just got to know that the answers are already there. And we just need to follow the Torah. And I know for people who are not religious, it can seem, oh, the Torah again. But that's what it was there for, this extra refinement. You know, we were sitting at the table, and this is an answer to another question, on Shabbat. And I realized that on Shabbat in Shul, I was reading, I was about to do Shema, but I said, I want an extra connection. I'm going to do some of it in English. And then I realized it said there, Ushvo al hagoyim ma'al sevarenu. And it, you know, what it means is, you know, and Hashem break the yoke of the nations from up on our necks, to break it. This is one of the things we're davening for, Hashem to take the yoke of the nations on our necks. So what I need to say here is that Jews, more than anybody else, understand what the knee on the neck is all about. You know, all through the pogroms, all through the, you know, the Ethiopians have had their story where land has been confiscated. 1947, how many Yemenites were killed, how many Moroccans were killed. We know, we've got the Holocaust, we've got this, we know what it is to have the knee on the neck. And we're looking at this image on the TV as if it only pertains to Black people. And we're afraid to come forward. But we got to know that we're in no better position and that we have the neck. You know, right now, we have had to talk, what's his name? Keir Starmer had to sack Rebecca Long, what her name is, try not to remember it, because she was tweeting that the Jews are the ones that taught the American police that grip, that technique of the knee on the neck. And it's the Jews. We are responsible for the financial system around the world. We are responsible for coronavirus, you know? So we, more than others, should know what this pressure of the nation is. And Black people have got it. And, you know, I feel I've got, like, you know, a knee on my Black neck and a knee on my Jewish neck, you know? So I just know that we've got to rise to this situation and we've got to start teaching what the Torah teaches.
So it was just amazing watching people's faces there, Loretta, as you were throwing down a very important gauntlet to me. And it's really important to me that this panel is not just a box ticking exercise in having a discussion on something important. I mean, it's important that we hear it and it's important we understand the terms. But I think there is a very necessary purpose and why we have come together here this evening, and that is, it's important to know what we can do differently and what we can do better, and perhaps what has been seen as best practice that we could incorporate into our lives or our communities. And I said, as a rabbi in a shul who has to be careful who gets called up and how, to give instructions to the security guards and to make the children's services and the schools welcoming. You know, you've identified some of those key things. But perhaps let's go to Stephen. What could we do better, individually or collectively? Or what have you seen that's really best practice that ought to be embraced? Let's get some outcomes from this evening.
Right, so I think the biggest and really useful best bit of best practice is, and I think you've shown this in the way you've led this session this evening, is a reflection that we're none of us perfect. One of the things that, I mean, there are many, many reasons why the last 5 years did not see progress in the Labour Party on the issue of anti-Semitism, other than they got better at it. But the first and the biggest one was that they believed them to be accused of racism was the same thing as being accused of, I don't know, having, kind of being radioactive, something that could be measured and was intrinsic to you. And then the second you swallowed a radioactive isotope, you're radioactive forever and you can't fix it. And one of the things I have really found at the start of this process is that there have been some places which have said, oh, it's great you're doing this, let us know how we can improve. And some places where they're almost, it's like they're frightened that I'm going to come at the end of it with a piece of paper sign saying, you're racist. And they'll be kind of cast out into the outer darkness. And I think that is the single biggest change we can both have in our community and demonstrate to the rest of the country. And because we're the first religious community to do this, the first diaspora to do this, is to demonstrate that you can go through a process like this. You can declare there are ways that you are less inclusive without anyone necessarily being evil or wicked. And I think that the massive strides in anti-racism in the 20th century were partly about increasing the taboo about things you couldn't say. But the thing we have to work out in the 21st century is a way for people to kind of come forward, admit they've done something, whether through thoughtlessness or because they made an off-color joke or anything, right? Then they can admit that they want to change, and then they don't feel that they're going to kind of be sort of cast out. And I think that is the sort of single biggest thing, is for us to, in an odd way, right? No one walks out when we talk about how we can be better people in a service because they go, oh, you're telling me I'm awful. We accept that we are on a journey of self-improvement. And that to me feels like the biggest thing. And of course, there will be 4 or 5 concrete recommendations at the end of this 6-month process that I'm embarking on.
Very good. Sagi, are there any things that you think that we as a community could do? Anything that we anything that we could learn from that you have seen that's worked well? I've lost Sagi. We've lost Sagi. Let's head over to Mazal while I try and find Sagi.
I want to start by letting you in on a secret. I don't know if you know, but the discourse about diversity and racism in Israel is so far behind. It's not, it's nice for me. I'm sitting with you and I'm talking to you about racism. And I know for a fact that you're probably much more open-minded than the Israeli public. This is my experience with Jewish communities around the world. When I'm thinking about moving forward, and I'm thinking about this discussion that we're having here and me participating, first of all, I would like to say that we can think about all the reasons for why it is this way, but I'm thinking that Israeli public and Israel in general have much to learn about talking about diversity and thinking diversity and racism from Jewish communities outside of Israel. I think that the fact that we're living here in Israel in a Jewish state minimizes our experience from our experiences of being in touch with different groups and living with all kinds of ethnicities and social groups next to each other. So sometimes it creates an obstacle when we want to talk about racism, because our work here is still to open people to that idea that we have racism issues here. So I'm thinking that even this discussion, talking to you, first of all, I would like to offer ourselves, the Ethiopian Jews in Israel. We are at least 40 years living here, and we're dealing with being Black, being Jewish, inside the Jewish state. We have a lot to contribute to the table in terms of discussion. And what I would like to ask you is to be always saying be anti-racist and take a stand and lead the interaction with that dialogue and own it as Jewish people, as a Jewish community, both at your environment, but not only. I'm thinking about the whole Jewish world. And one of the things that since the death of murder of George Floyd, we are a small organization in Israel. We talk to our donors and to people that we know, Jewish communities outside of Israel, North America, and so forth. And we are coming across a strong objection to comparing, to putting the case of police brutality and aggression in Israel in front of, in the same place, in the same level of what is going on in America or in Europe or in different places around the world. And what I would like to say is, and every time we need to explain that, the fact that we are doing this, the fact that we are putting George Floyd with Solomon Teka's death here in Israel last year, it doesn't say anything about your Judaism. It may say something about your Judaism if you're afraid of that comparison, if you're using that to disregard it or to avoid talking about it. And what we would like to say, that comparison doesn't necessarily have to say something about the Jewish world, or it doesn't have to, to doubt the legitimacy of the state of Israel. It will only do that if you choose to not take a stand as a Jewish person. If you choose to not take a stand and not talk about those issues, if you choose to not take a stand and not, confront the Jewish state about the things that we're having here inside Israel, you have power. You have a say within the Jewish world. Use it, not only in your surrounding area, but worldwide. We need to think. We live in a global world right now. We need to think about our impact in that discourse in that way. Jews of color, Black Jews, it's something that you can find in every place where you have Jewish people. I'm thinking about my experience as an Ethiopian Israeli, as a Jewish Black woman here in Israel. I don't need to be so isolated. I don't have to. I should be able to talk to Loretta. I should be able to learn more about other Jews of colors, and we can together lead something that is much progressive than the way that we interact now and the way that we see things now. So you're more than welcome to be in touch with us and just follow us. We have a Facebook page, we have a website. We try to discuss those issues not only in Israel but also abroad, and to create those kind of platforms. And hopefully we will meet again and we will be able to shape each other's life discourse, thoughts, whatever about racism and being Jewish and Jews of color.
Thanks very much, Mazal. Efrat has just uploaded onto the chat line the Facebook link for the Association of Ethiopian Jews, and it is a particularly edifying page. It's really good and informative. I don't need to go all the way overseas in order to get pulled up on some of the stuff that happens within the community, and there haven't been a lot of hands going up, blue hands going up, but it's wonderful to be able to call on Chloe, who's very much a child of Kinloss, to be able to say some words to our panel now, and to all of us, of course.
Hi, everyone. So hopefully I'm pinned if you can see me, hopefully. Hi, so I'm Chloe Sommer. I'm the daughter of Natalie Sommer, who in the Kinloss community is a white Jewish woman who takes the children's service and is an incredible asset to the community. A little bit about me. So I'm 20 years old. I am a mixed race Jewish woman who was originally born in Israel, Tel Aviv. And we moved here, me and my mum, when I was 3 years old, and Kinloss has been a very big part of my life. As I was part of the Jewish community, and I would attend synagogue and attend Hebrew school, where unfortunately that is where my racist journey within the community began. I've experienced, as much as there's been incredible families who've been so lovely and supportive and great for me and my mum, I have experienced a lot of racism within the Jewish community. And I just wanted to be touching upon how Kinloss and Jewish communities as a whole, like with white Jews, really need to be understanding how I feel like there's a hierarchy between, you have white Jews and then people of colour Jews, and it needs to be understood, as everyone has been saying incredibly so well tonight, how Jews, we originated from the Middle East, and we didn't start off as white. So it doesn't mean that if you're a different colour, as we've all said, we are still Jewish. That's our culture, that's our religion, it's our race, and we're all equal within that. So it needs to be understanding how, yes, we should be respecting and understanding how, as a Black Jew, of course I have my Black race, and that's the culture that I need to be expressing and educating people, and also understanding my identity within that myself. But it's not going, that's cultural sensitivity. It's about going, okay, she has some Black culture too within her Jewish religion, and we need to be understanding that and educating us all together. Because someone tried to speak.
No, carry on.
I'm trying to think what else which hasn't been said. Also, I just want to touch upon how it's really, really important at the moment, because I know we've been saying a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement, and there's been some issues with people feeling that they can't support Black Lives Matter due to the comments that have been made within their anti-Zionist views. And what's really important is that we need to understand how, yes, there might be some comments that we link to that which we do not support as Jews. Like, I'm fighting against all types of racism, but we need to understand how, yes, we should be supporting the Black Lives Matter movement with the correct way and the correct stance they're fighting for Black lives. But that doesn't mean that we should now create the separation between Jews now not supporting Black Lives Matter, because Black lives do matter, and all lives matter, and all lives do not matter until Black lives do, until Jewish lives do, Muslim lives do. So that's why it needs to be understood how Jews should definitely still be supporting Black people who want to be fighting for their race to be having the justice that they deserve. So I just want to touch upon how it's the issue with, you don't want to be fighting prejudice against prejudice. And I think it's really important that Jews, we need to be understanding that the more we come together and fight for other races that are also suffering with oppression, the more people will also be fighting for us. And that's hopefully why we need to be coming together as a collective with all different types of races to fight for the justice that we all deserve. And I just think within Kinloss at the moment, just all of that applies for the community to be, as we said, to when there's if it's a Black child in the community who's being introduced, a Black Jew, not to be seeing them as any less or any different. It's about we're all equal, we're all Jews, and to enlighten them with the Black culture that they have, but also the Jewish identity that should be enlightened and flourished, and that we all need to be coming together as we are all Jewish people. That makes a lot of sense.
Thanks very much, Chloe. Stephen, just picking up, politically, and with your New Statesman hat on and everything else. Black Lives Matter, the movement, is something that has become tarnished in the eyes of the Jewish community because of its support of, or its hostility to Israel in some sectors. How are we supposed to relate to that?
Well, I think Maria Mazal has shown exactly the right way of doing it. And I would urge anyone who didn't read her, I thought, very intelligent and well-judged statement on this matter on the Jewish Chronicle to read it on the website, because I think it has much broader applicability than just if you are a Black British Jew or a Jew of colour. Although Natalie, thank you very much for that, and I really hope you will feel able to come forward and give evidence to our commission. We know that regrettably there are many civic institutions in the United Kingdom which either, in the case of Black Lives Matter UK's Twitter account, use openly, and in my view, open and shut anti-Semitic language, or at the very least are indifferent to it. And that is as true if you are a Black British Jew as it is if you are an LGBT British Jew. And I think the thing that Marie has done very intelligently is she said, look, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing, which is to campaign for this issue that matters. and I'm going to condemn this statement, this anti-Semitic statement this organization has made, and I'm not going to allow myself to be distracted from being a campaigner for anti-racism. Because in many ways, and this is the problem with all kind of sort of street movements in some ways, right? The average person protesting to stop Brexit did not have a great deal in common with the people at the top of the People's Vote campaign. Fortunately, the people at the top of the People's Vote campaign were not engaging in statements of the kind that the Black Lives Matter Twitter account was. But I think then the model that the board has shown, other than getting someone who rambles far too excessively in answers like this, in engaging with this type of thing, is an exemplar for how to deal with that issue, because it is unfortunately much broader than just what it is like to be a Black British Jew. Yeah, I read a piece in which I tried to explain, because obviously lots of our readers do not understand the problems with some of that language. So I tried to explain why it was a problem, why I thought that it was, we had to kind of push forward and ignore it. And the number of very thoughtful messages I got from, from LGBT Jews who felt in exactly that position because of the thoughtless comments that are sometimes made by some advocacy organizations. And so I think sometimes one of the burdens, and one of the reasons why I think one of the words I hear a lot in this commission from Black British Jews is exhausted, is one of the burdens is sometimes you have to go, okay, well, I'm not going to engage in that liberation campaign because of what it said, but I am going to continue to campaigning for liberation, even if unfortunately I have to do it in a separate way.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Sagi, we lost you just before, and welcome back. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to add that we should be doing as a community, or that you've seen as best practice?
Thank you, Rabbi Lauren. First, if the story of George can teach us one very important thing is that we have still a long way to go. United States, the country which consider the mother of democratic country, at the center of 21, still the police have a problem with the color and the way he killed this guy. It taught us, we have long way to go in terms of education, in terms of what does mean to be a Black. I sometimes feel people, they don't consider the Black man as human being. Now, with the way he killed it, it just, it seems like he killed an animal, not person. So we have to go back and start from the beginning. What does mean dignity of a human being? What does mean equality? What does mean, God created the man by the shadow, the man was created by the shadow of God. So we have to go long way in terms of education ourselves. And coming to my country, Israel, when I saw the demonstration in the United States, you look at the people, they were so diverse, people, Black people, white people, Hispanic people, Asian people. And when my community went to demonstrate with the case of this kid which was shot by the police, majority of the demonstration of the people were of our community, from the community. And you don't see many Israelis get involved and demonstrate. And it teaches you that in Israel, unfortunately, there is separate between the community and the rest of society. Many Israelis think when happens something with the community, they are Ethiopians, instead of see the law was violated and the law come to defend every citizen in the country. First, when someone get hurt and someone violates the law, and you have to care about the violation of the law to see that there is a law and someone is breaking it out, and we have to go to the state, not because of Ethiopian community, because is the charter of Megillat Ha'atzmaut, okay, of the independence that we have. that we should equally, in order to live in Israel together, we have to respect each other in terms of religion, in terms of equality, in terms of color, of the skin of color, etc., etc. So when I saw the diverse of demonstration in the United States, I say to myself, we have to learn a lot in terms of getting out and demonstrate every Israeli. It's not about Ethiopian community. It's not at all. It's about our life in this country. If we want to live together, we have to observe the law and to respect each other. And finally, I want to say something positive. When we came from Sudan, when we were smuggled from Sudan, we were smuggled by the Mossad. And in the middle of the night, at the border of the enemy, came Israeli soldier crossing the enemy border, and they cover in the middle of the night by blanket, cover us and rescue us from these enemy places. And it teach me that really we have great people in this country, and if we work together with those people, and we can really shape Israel and to dismiss all these distort cases that we see, discrimination, racism, etc., and to work with the police department in order to dismiss all these such things that not fit Jewish word, not fit our religion, not fit our tradition, because the Jewish people, we have really suffered throughout the history, and we should be careful and respect each other.
Thank you so much, Sagi. It is almost 10 o'clock here, which means it's almost midnight in Israel. Yeah. Stephen talked about an exhaustion in dealing with this process. I imagine people who are 2 hours ahead are even that much more exhausted. As a kid in Bnei Akiva and at Cheder, we used to sing Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is when brothers, sisters sit together. And the word gam in that sentence is something that's seen as, what does it add to it? You could just say shevet achim yachad. We're sitting together. What's the gam? The gam means also. The also means that we don't just say that this person is around me, but it's recognizing that I make room for that person also. It's really important for us to extend our togetherness into being not just someone who happens to be alongside me, but they are with me and they are part of my community. This has been a really fascinating discussion for me to listen to, and I've really appreciated the chance to do it together with the Board of Deputies and together with the Association of Ethiopian Jews, but particularly to Mazal and Stephen and Loretta and Sagi, for whom this is his very first Zoom session. He broached it today, and to be a part of that and to bring the energy and the wisdom and the articulation that we've been able to enjoy this evening. Thanks so much. Just before we close, Loretta has just typed she'd like to answer Read the Way Forwards, which means that she's going to shout at me for 5 minutes, and that must be worth listening to. But before I let her do that, on Wednesday evening at 8:15, I'm going to be in conversation with Rabbi David Stav, who is one of my heroes in Israel. He is somebody who, through the Tzohar organization, has addressed many very important ideas for bringing the community together and breaking down some of the religious secular divide within the community. And I hope that we'll have the same attention and interest for that. Go on, Loretta, fire your shot. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Loretta, you're on mute. Thank you.
Right, okay, if you got it. Yeah, no, it was just a point I wanted to raise. About the Jewish world and how it's become very insular, certainly around where I am. It means there's very little interaction. We're talking about the way forward. It means there's very little interaction between different types of Jews. And it means that very little interaction within the Jewish community and the outside world. And really looking forward, I just wanted to say, I think the time has come for us to be secure. And I know everyone here has that sense of wanting to preserve, especially when you live Chutz La'aretz, there's a need to preserve ourselves, to protect. We don't want to expose our children to a lot of things out there, but somehow people like the Chief Rabbi Sachs, they went to non-Jewish schools and they experienced being with other non-Jews. And I think that's something that's lacking within the community. People have lost the sense of security, knowing how to connect with other people that are different from them without losing themselves. And I think we need to start having a forum in which we can start to interact and in which we start to change also the curriculum, you know, where we're teaching the children with, just basically want to mention that the curriculum is something that's always concerned me. It doesn't reflect the experience of all Jews. And this is something we've got to have. And we've also got to train our mothers into the ways in which they're raising their children to be particularly sensitive and to act in the right way in teaching their kids the Torah. And again, it goes from the top. Not to shout at you, Rabbi, but it goes from the top, from the chief rabbi right down, from Israel. Because, you know, one of the things was, even after they decided that the Ethiopian Jews were Jews in 1908, you had the chief rabbis fighting about it in 1974, 1973. And so we need to know that if 47 rabbis have come together, you know, that even from the top, we need to see this clear leadership in anti-racism. I wanted to speak because I hadn't spoken for a bit. All right, thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much. And there's something we can all do. I was walking past a house on Shabbat, and outside the window, we might be asking, what can I do? First, we've got to call out racism when it's happening. When you hear these words being used around us that is not right, you know, whether they refer to being not a Jew, or, you know, the way we use the word goy, the way we use the non-pleasant words, we've got to stop. If it's in our family, we've got to make sure it's not in our families. We've got to root it out. And I saw this picture on someone's window. It had Martin Luther King on it. And they were saying, the time has come for change. The time has come for us to start interacting. And I just wanted to leave the message that it's something as small as that left an impact on me. We can all start doing small things, getting involved with other groups and interacting. That's what it's all about. And that's how the Jewish light's supposed to be.
So thank you very much, Loretta.
Great preacher, Loretta.
Yes, I'm looking forward to talking to you, Mazal.
when I set up the panel and announced it, it was amazing to see the interest that we had from some people and a flurry of questions and points and documents that I ought to read. And it's been an education over the last couple of weeks. It's certainly been an education this evening, but I think from what we've heard, it's going to be an ongoing education as we try and bring more understanding, more harmony, and less aggression, microaggression, intolerance, and institutionalized racism to bear on harmony, or bringing harmony to a unified people and to a strengthened and more harmonious society. Thanks everyone for joining us, particularly to Mazal and to Stephen, to Sagi and Loretta. It's been absolutely wonderful, and thanks for staying with us so late. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Call to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello.